This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, Season 11, Episode 2. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the ConcealedCarry.com network. I am your host, Riley Bowman, and today is a special episode where we are going to play back an interview I had the opportunity of doing together with the president of HK USA, Mike Holley. We were able to connect a couple weeks ago at SHOT Show 2025 in Las Vegas, Nevada, and had a wonderful chat together with Mike. And he was so gracious with his time. I'm not going to keep you too long here at the introduction. We're going to get right to the interview as quickly as possible. I'll just mention, as it shouldn't be too much of a surprise, but HK has been a supporter of our podcast now for a little over a year, and we're thankful for their continued support. And so thank you for your listeners' support of our sponsors, which today shouldn't be too much of a surprise, is sponsored by HK, or HK USA, which is a U.S. operation. Also, you should know that HK is a big supporter of our annual Guardian Conference, which takes place the third weekend of September each year in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And looking forward to being there and being a part of that, and hoping to see a bunch of you there as well. You can come and, of course, take some amazing training over several days there, as well as check out some cool products from our sponsors. We'll have some HK pistols there at the very least. Hey, another thing that's kind of cool and exciting to make mention, we continue to lock down our instructor lineup for this year, and we are pleased to announce that we'll have, an episode ago, you had Dan Brady here on the podcast of Apache Solutions, who taught at last year's conference on short notice to fill in for one of our instructors that had an emergency come up last moment. And Dan will be returning this year to this conference, but also one of his colleagues, Zach Cox, will be joining us as well, and will be putting on some shotgun classes for the conference. So super excited for that, and to see shotgun classes return to the conference for the second year. And it looks like we might have also Zach and Dan teaching together a low light class as well, which should be fantastic. Folks, learn more about the Guardian Conference, as well as all of our sponsors involved and instructors involved, and of course HK is a part of that. Go to guardianconference.com. Get signed up before it gets too late. The early bird price is still in effect for a little longer. So, guardianconference.com. Let's go ahead and play the tape now of this interview together with myself and President of HK USA, Mike Holley.
Hey folks, I have with me on the podcast a very special guest. I'm thrilled to have him on, Mr. Mike Holley of HK USA, President of HK USA. Is that right?
That's correct.
Excellent. And so here we are at SHOT Show 2025. Have a little private room here and the opportunity to spend a little bit of time together talking about the goings-on at HK. So, sir, if you don't mind us starting with a little bit, just so folks can get to know you a little bit about your background, if you don't mind.
Sure.
How'd you get started? How did you even get into this industry in the first place?
Sure. So, first and foremost, I've always been a hunter, a fisher, a trapper, all the way back to, I'm 56 years old. So, goes all the way back to being a small boy, hunting with neighbors and family and such. And back then you used to be able to take your shotgun to school and put it in your locker.
Yes.
Those days are of course long gone, at this point, but, I've always had a passion for hunting, and fishing. And I started at a very early age, working on fishing boats, back when you had odd jobs as a teenager.
Right.
I worked on several different types of fishing boats, in Chincoteague, Virginia. And, eventually when I was 14, got a job, with PepsiCo and eventually stayed working with them for a very long time, went through their management program, got through high school, got through, the college, and ultimately, worked a long career there, learned an awful lot about sales, marketing, products, branding, etc. And I'd go to work and I'd work 75 hours a week, and it would leave me a couple hours worth of hunting maybe. And I really had an and urge to get into the industry. So I had a couple of friends that were involved in the industry, and just picking their brains a couple of different times, I decided one day that I was going to retire from PepsiCo and start working in our industry. Didn't quite know what that meant yet. I started looking at sales representation immediately, and lo and behold, I ended up meeting a gentleman named Jack Muty at the time he was at Beretta, and I've got an interview with Stoger Arms in Benelli, USA, for a product manager role. And anyways, started there, worked at Benelli, USA, for approximately 9 years. Worked at Savage for several years, and then came to HK approximately 11 years ago.
Awesome. Came to HK as president of the U.S. operation?
Yeah. So I came as vice president of sales and marketing. And it was right prior to the introduction of what it was, the standard VP9. And so I came in right at the beginning of 2014, and ultimately that was one of my first tasks, was to introduce that product to the consumer market.
Which was a big deal.
It was a huge deal for us.
Yeah.
And a very, very much a turning point to what is ultimately today HK USA as well.
Yeah. Excellent. I appreciate you sharing some of that background with us. That's always fascinating to learn a little bit about kind of where people come from. I mean, like you said, working for PepsiCo, which is a huge company, huge brand, right? And then transitioning over into, as we call it, the industry. And so all our backgrounds, I'm sure, have some kind of uniqueness to it, because I didn't always work in this industry either.
For sure.
So kind of always fun to learn about that a little bit. HK USA. So as you mentioned, you came on board a little before the launch of the VP9, as we call, I guess now the A0.
That's correct.
Very first generation. Kind of a big deal, because it's become quite a popular pistol here in the U.S. I don't know exactly where everything totally stacks up, and I'm still learning and getting to know HK a little bit more. But it seems to me that it does quite well sales wise. Now we have a whole new rework of the VP9 series of pistols with the A1 series. The VP9K and VP9F. We have a couple of samples here on the table in front of us. Folks can certainly check out the write-up I did on our website at concealedcarry.com to learn more about those, and also a video that goes along with them as well. And I'm sure we're going to dive into that some more. For those that don't know, which I suspect there's probably a number of folks in our audience of the Concealed Carry podcast, Heckler & Koch is a German-based company that has had a U.S. presence for quite a number of years now. Can you kind of, in a simple term, explain what does HK look like as a company? How does it work with everything going on over in Germany? How does it work here in the U.S.? Just sort of a 30,000-foot view.
Sure. So I think first and foremost that the lineage of the group is important in the dialogue as it relates to why we've done certain things as a company, and in some instances why we have not. And we traditionally, from a group perspective, are a military and law enforcement first operation in company. We truly focus and live by the mantras that we've set as our core competencies internally as an organization, with our security messaging, preparing our warfighters for combat, and ultimately to defend whatever it is that they're defending at the time. So we wake up every day as a group, and we focus on those items first and foremost. The civilian side of the business is very different, right? We're waking up to defend ourselves in most instances. That security is just as important. It's just different security with a different mindset. So we're a defense law enforcement company first, that's learning how, even though we're 75 years old, we're really learning how to cater to and work directly with the civilian market here in the U.S. because it's very different. In Germany, they don't have a Second Amendment. They don't understand our culture no more than we understand theirs specifically. Even though we go visit places and we try to ingrain ourselves into whatever that culture is, we get a good taste of it, and then we go back home and it becomes gray very quickly. So to be able to have a dedicated focus on the civilian market here in the U.S. is what we've been working on for the last several years, up to and including the rebranding of HK USA. The CC9 is a great example of that, right? So we are the sole civilian market for the most part in the world. If you took all the world's civil market and filled it up, it doesn't represent the demand that we see out of Florida, for example.
Right.
So it's just not that large of a marketplace. So HK USA gives us purpose-built products coming from engineers here in the U.S. that understand our industry, that understand the need for concealed carry, that understand the U.S. marketplace specifically. They wake up every day and go to work and come work specifically for the civilian marketplace.
That's a really important distinction to make. As you mentioned, Heckler & Koch as a company, primarily over the course of its history, being a military and law enforcement first operation. And then seeing now that there's this huge opportunity, it is a huge opportunity.
Absolutely.
The civilian market here in the United States, we are very unique in that regard. And I'm glad you mentioned a little bit about that, because we talk about sometimes, and we've done this on the podcast a little bit, talking about what are things like in some of the other countries throughout the world on the civilian side. And it is very different. I mean, there's a few select kind of pockets, if you will, in the world where it's like, for instance, there's some pathways where you can purchase, own firearms, and even carry firearms in maybe places like even like Guatemala, but very, very, very small, or Brazil, or that kind of thing. New Zealand, perhaps a little bit, although that's changed in recent years as well, in large respect. But here, I mean, the market is just it's crazy. I mean, just how unique we are as Americans to have what we have, to have the rights we have, even though those rights are perhaps at times in our own little respects in little pockets. Like, I'm from the state of Colorado, which is a great state. I've been there 15 years now, and in 15 years it's changed dramatically. Absolutely. Unfortunately, right? But still, we have a great deal of freedom compared to a lot of parts of the world. So that's pretty cool. So there's some unique benefits, though, of having a company that is so focused on law enforcement and military equipment and contracts, that you take that job very seriously.
Absolutely.
Right? Can you tell us a little bit about how important it is to make the firearms that you do for military and law enforcement customers, as far as like whether it's a quality thing, whether it's a performance thing, like how important is that piece from a design engineering standpoint?
Yeah. So again, with our lineage being defense first, we've had to kind of learn as we go, how do we build that process into a civilian process? I'll give you a couple of examples. These are internal challenges that we've seen that maybe other companies figured out, we'll just say, a long time ago, or still working on themselves, still chasing that. So law enforcement in the U.S., so there's 1 million badged officers. There's typically about 85% of them that ultimately carry firearms. Life expectancy of a pistol with a law enforcement agency is typically 8 years. So if you got 850,000 badged officers, they average 8 years in life expectancy. That's 100,000 pistols a year. You guys know that Ruger and Smith being publicly traded, you see how many units they sell. You see how many Glocks are in the stores and SIGs and HKs and all the brands that come. These guns are not being sold to law enforcement only, right? So, and in addition to that, the civilian market has an passion for the products. They don't have to have one pistol, right? An officer's typically only carrying one pistol since the 1800s. And so that doesn't mean he or she doesn't own 8 to 9 on average, like firearms owners do here in the U.S., right? So what we find is that the consumer's attention span on the civilian market is much shorter than it is on the law enforcement side or on the military side. So if you get a contract with a 416 rifle, you're probably going to have that contract for 10 years. If you get that VP pistol contract, you're probably going to have that contract for the better part of 10 years. Look at our own military, right? Whether it was the Beretta pistol or what is now the SIG pistol, right? So those guys are going to maintain those contracts for a very long time. Since SIG has taken the Army contract with their version of the 320, I've probably bought 15 pistols. So as a consumer like yourself, ultimately our attention span's just not like the defense side. So we've realized that we were already slow to market, but we're really slow to the commercial market, and we got to figure out a way to do better to be able to leapfrog and get not caught up, but ultimately expedite and get products that are more relevant faster for the consumer market.
What have been some of the challenges particularly as the U.S.-based operation of Heckler & Koch, HK USA now, what have been some of the challenges to being able to try to keep up with the market or to stay fresh in the mind of consumers?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it ends up being, again, the business cases and the bandwidth and the real working understanding of the culture in the U.S. So we've had this restructuring of HK USA, and what that is providing us that was different than in the past is, one, much more autonomy, but two, speed to decision making. We may not be any faster in developing a product, but we'll make the decision much quicker to be able to start that time or start that clock, right? So on average for a pistol design, whether it's a VPA-1 or whether it's a CC9, our average pace is typically 5 years. Some of our competitors certainly do it better than or faster than that, I should say. But with our reliability and durability message, we don't litmus test on the consumer. So we go through a stringent quality process that is established by our entire group, quite frankly. It doesn't matter where the product's manufactured, whether it's made in Germany, made in the UK, made in the US. We're following the same quality message and the same quality testing protocols so that we have one group criteria for quality. And that's very, very important for us. It also means it takes us a little longer. It also means it costs us more money. If I'm shooting my ammunition doing testing versus the consumer shooting tens of thousands of rounds, in some instances, hundreds of thousands of rounds, there's a cost associated with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. We'll talk some more about that for sure. You mentioned some restructuring. So could you give us kind of a sense of, to the amount that you're able to do so, of what things used to look like for you guys versus what it looks like now with HK USA?
Yeah, so let's just say 5 years ago, we were an importer, right? We would import the product from Germany. It would be whatever capacity that they had left over that didn't fill whatever military contract they had. And they would call us and say, hey, look, you can get 5,000 of this, or you get 50 of this, or you can get whatever this is. How would you like them? We would order them accordingly, and we would get the product in and introduce it into the marketplace at our leisure and when the capacity and the machines delivered the product. And the history as it relates to how that happened. Several years ago, what we did from a structure perspective is identified, hey, look, we got to turn this upside down. So we got to put this priority first. How do we put the U.S. consumer first? And ultimately building purpose-built products for them. So the CC9 the CC9 launched with the introduction of HK USA, but the CC9 did not start with the introduction of HK USA. That started 5+ years ago now. And with our focus to saying, hey, look, we need more autonomy in the U.S. to be able to support this consumer. We need to have our own cell. We need to have our own local R&D. We need to be able to focus specifically on the needs of the U.S. consumer. There's many, many examples, but we are the only market that really has a true concealed carry marketplace.
Yep.
Right? Most countries don't have that, right? We're the only market that has a rimfire offering. We're the only market that has a 45, right? These are not global cartridges. These are not global categories, right? We have micros, we have subcompacts, we have compacts. These guns are not being carried elsewhere. Whereas here, they need to be purpose-built. If you're going to have a young engineer, regardless of whether it's at HK or any other company, you just can't have a guy or a gal whip together a concealed carry pistol who's never even carried a pistol or understands how it wears on your belt. How does it wear on one guy or gal's belt different than the next guy? Your waist configuration, inside, outside, all of the different ways that we carry. Gosh, look at the seasonality we have. You carry a pistol very differently if you're in North Dakota in the winter than you do in Florida in the summer. Right. These are just very different carrying processes. So to teach someone all of those things without being born and raised into it, it's almost impossible to be able to achieve that task. So the HK USA is able to bring us those resources here in the U.S., building purpose-built products on with our materials and in our facilities.
Right. And you've expanded your facilities quite a bit, from what I understand.
We have. We added a 50,000+ square foot facility in 2016. We currently are manufacturing HK 45s, MRA4 rifles in 5.56 and 7.62, and the CC9.
Yeah, that's a huge operation. I mean, that's so. In 2016, as you mentioned, as you expanded and added that 50,000 square feet. In 2016, was that were you at that point already kind of starting to look ahead
Absolutely.
to kind of things like the CC9 coming to fruition?
Yeah, absolutely. So we didn't. I'll preface that by saying I don't think we knew we wanted. I think we knew we needed to be in the CC9 business or in the concealed carry business, but we weren't ready at that point in time to go execute, right? So we very much needed to get our rifle production up and running first and foremost, because that's something that I can't import because of 922R.
Yep.
And so that was our priority at the time. And then we quickly, eventually as we got closer to 2018, we said, okay, guys, we need to start really working on this CC9 pistol.
That's fantastic. And again, we are going to come back and we're going to talk some more about some of the specifics of these newer products, and especially the CC9, because I think it does represent a huge shift for your business, and both in terms of what you guys are doing to having R&D that designed it, engineered it, now building it and selling it here in the U.S., but also just in the perception, I think, of the market this is a huge segment of concealed carry as a marketplace. People are looking for guns like the CC9 to carry, to use, whether they are in Florida or in North Dakota. I'm glad you mentioned that, by the way. One of the other unique things besides the Second Amendment as it exists in the United States of America, but our country is so unique because it is quite a large country and encompasses so many different climates and environments and cultures even across the U.S. And so that also is, I hadn't really quite, thought through that until you mentioned it. It's like, yeah, that's a great point. Just the fact that we have a Florida or a Hawaii or an Alaska or a North Dakota. So very unique and different across the U.S. while still being unified in the fact that we have this thing called the U.S. Constitution that enshrines some pretty important rights for us humans. So, one other thing before we, kind of dive into some of those other areas, and including some of the products. I know that it's really important to your team culturally as a company that your people understand, number one, the products they're making, two, the people that those products are going to, and that means that your people need to be also users and consumers of said products, meaning they're actually using and putting to use and going through training and taking classes and things. I mean, I have attended training with some of your people. One of them's right here in this room.
Absolutely.
Bill, right? I've seen this man at training courses, at training conferences, taking classes, which is really, really cool because as you know, as we know, but maybe not everybody listening to this podcast knows, people that work in the firearms industry, in the firearms space, yes, there are some diehard, true blue, whatever, red-blooded Americans that love guns, love shooting guns, and take it very seriously that work in this industry. But there are also folks that this is just a job.
Sure.
And they don't appreciate it probably to the extent that perhaps we do. And so could you speak a little bit to how important it is and kind of what the culture is like at HK USA?
Yeah. So first and foremost, in Columbus, we have 110-ish folks, of which slightly over 20% of them are veterans. Mm-hmm. So that's the first comment I would make about the hiring processes and protocols that we follow. The second comment I would make is we're right on the Alabama line, so we have Georgia and Alabama. Georgia has a very basic concealed carry process, and you have an ID card and such, and ultimately 65% of our employees carry a concealed carry card with them from the state of Georgia, and quite a few of the folks have ownership as well and carry as well in Alabama as well. So we have a gun culture there. Our employees buy our weapon systems. They buy our competitors' weapon systems based off of what their needs are, right? So we're not a one brand family, right? So if it's purpose built for a purpose I have, I'm going to buy it. My employees will buy it, regardless of what the brand is specifically. As it relates to the culture that we have internally, it's pretty easy as the CEO of an organization to say, hey, look, here are your performance objectives for 2025. Oh, by the way, we're doing this now for the year. And when you sit down and go, hey, we need to be able to I'll pick a sales guy, right? You need to hit this certain target. It's always numbers related, right? We need to do this particular service frequency to your top 5 customers as an example. But down the line, that person maybe they have a shortcoming in a HR issue. Maybe you set them up for a class for HR. Maybe it's compliance, right? But at the bottom of that, you also set them up for a class and go, hey, you need to go out and do some long range shooting because we're looking at this product on our roadmap, or we're looking at that product on our roadmap. And he or she may say, well, I've not really shot much further. In Georgia, I've not shot any further than 100 yards ever. Right. So what a great, so they may be a pistol expert, right? But they don't know anything about rifles specifically. So that guy or that gal will get signed up for a class, and that becomes part of their job performance for the year 2025 or years past, obviously. So concealed carry ends up being one of those as well. We engage our employees. We embrace the employees. Training's important, and we send them out to do lots of this type of training.
Yeah. As I mentioned, I've seen some of those very folks doing just that, which I admire and respect highly as a company and as a company culture. I think it's wonderful. You mentioned in the beginning, as you talked about yourself coming on board with Heckler & Koch, that you were right there sort of at the beginning of the launch of the VP9, the original, and which is, again, done very well. And, now we're a decade plus into the VP9 being in existence. I think it's a fantastic pistol. I've enjoyed shooting it, as in my representation as a brand ambassador. The A1 series is kind of the new. So I guess we'll go ahead and maybe focus on a couple of things there before we get to also the other, new product, which is the CC9, which was released a few months ago. But we have here the VP9F and the VP9K, a true compact size pistol, and of course a true full-size pistol, filling in that kind of between that 4 and 5 inch mark, or that 4.5 inch length of the VP9F. Why the A1 series? What was there something that kind of spurred this? That was like, hey, because the VP9 I think is already a great gun, great, awesome performing pistol. As I mentioned, I've enjoyed shooting and competing with it, teaching with it, and so forth. But what was sort of the, impetus to, hey, let's do the A1 here?
Yeah, so it goes back to our strategy from what I would call our road mapping, right? So our road mapping is to summarize, that ends up being what products can we continue to get support out of from Germany? That's just one road. The next road ends up being what can we purpose build in the U.S. for our consumer, and then what products will fit that we can have a joint effort and be able to utilize. Typically, the joint efforts, because of importation in 922, they're typically rifles, right? So, setting that aside for now, on the VP A1, we've got the VP9. Originally, it was built specifically for the Bavarian Police Department. I was able to quickly make a few changes on it that were not U.S. consumer friendly. But not everything. So we got what they had to deliver to us with the VPA9. We executed accordingly. But there was a few opportunities that were in the pistol, right? It was kind of that tweener size back then. And ultimately, what we've seen in the industry is Glock has defined what the sizes are. It's a 17 or a 19. And so we said, well, on the VPA ones, when we're ready for that generational improvement, we're going to scale the size of the pistols based off of the way the U.S. market is shopping for them, right? And that's what we've done with these two particular pistols from a size perspective. In addition to that, there were some other opportunities that we've seen. There's been some opportunities where the market's migrated with finger grooves. Do you have them? Do you don't have them? Yes or no. Optics cut. Yes or no. Now it's only yes. Yes. Right. So it ends up being the flexibility and the true shootability of the pistols. This company, regardless of the category, is known for its reliability and durability. We have the most reliable and the most durable pistols in this entire building. I have no issues telling anybody that that's absolutely the case. So as it relates to shootability, it's something we continue to work on. If you carry a pistol in the Bavarian Police Department as your sidearm, shootability is important. But it's not their priority, right? So for us, it's very much about priority. And the reason why we prioritize it so high is your performance with these pistols for what we call that day ultimately ends up being the worst day of your life. Right. We take that very seriously. So we want these pistols, whether it's in the hands of our law enforcement here in the U.S. or whether it's in your hand and my hand, if and when these products need to be used, they need to be reliable, they need to be durable, but they darn sight need to perform from a shootability perspective. And a lot of pistols don't perform to that level.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And correct me if I'm wrong in this assumption, but my perception of a lot of the rest of the world's law enforcement agencies and kind of those respective, if you want to call those markets, is they probably differ quite a bit throughout the world. But I suspect that there's a lot of law enforcement agencies and departments throughout the world where shootability and performance with a pistol is probably not that high on a list, because for many of them, it's just a piece of steel that's slapped on their hip and probably doesn't get touched all that often. Am I wrong in making that assumption?
Yeah, so I don't think it's even an international thing. I think that's safe to say here domestically as well, right? So no police officer wants to use their weapon system, right? No civilian wants to use that weapon system. We train for the day and the time where we do need to defend ours or ours, right? So I think ultimately, as it relates to the difference, is our profession is not to train for that day. We're not law enforcement officers, right? They have a sworn duty to protect. They need to have a certain level of capability. The individual departments, whether they're nationally or internationally, have put together a criteria to control and engage what they either have to do from a scoring perspective or a certain number of rounds, and all the criteria that they follow. It's all different. But for you and I, we need to be able to go out, train, practice, be capable, and the tools that we use to provide the best performance. We do not walk down to our target, even if we've just shot the best magazine that we've ever shot, and say that's good enough. It's never going to be good enough, right? We're not selling shotguns. That's good enough. Yeah, it's good enough because you hit the duck with 47 pellets. That's enough, right? So carrying these products, you've also carried some pistols, I'm sure, in your experience, and some of your listeners have probably seen this as well. They're not very capable with these micro pistols. They're not very capable with these pistols. They don't have the ability to retrofit them to fit either their size or their weight, or their length of finger versus their palm. And it's very imperative that you build that, what we call shootability into your product. Yeah. Reading the owner's manual, right? We as men, we buy something, we open the box, we take it out, and we play with it. We don't read the manual. We just take it out and shoot it. And it's imperative that we go through the process on HK pistols to retrofit them to fit our hand, to fit our shooting style, to fit our capabilities. All of these things will make us better. The HK pistols of today that are on this table will make you a better shooter and a better performer. And when that performance equals security, you're darn right we take that very seriously.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate that. I know you also take the testing of your equipment very seriously, quality control very seriously. Can you speak a little bit to it more from a broader sense? I'm going to talk more specifically. I'm going to bring you to the CC9 and what you've done with that very specifically here in a moment, because I think it's quite remarkable, especially for the category of gun that it is. But kind of broadly, what is some of the testing that is involved? I know that everything is tested to like a NATO military standard, but can you speak to that a little bit more and kind of give us a sense of just how? We know it's important. And I think everybody listening is going to say, yeah, it's important to me that my gun works when I need it, that it's reliable. But what goes into that actually? Like, how do we actually, I guess, certify, quote unquote, if you want to put it that way in air quotes, that a gun's actually going to work when you need it on that day?
Yeah. So I think first and foremost, you work to the criteria of the design of whatever the weapon system is that you're currently working on. So when you say, okay, I'm gonna start working on a VPA-1 pistol. Well, what's the criteria that it needs to achieve? Well, you mentioned it needs to hit a NATO specification. Well, that's valid. What does that mean? Well, you break that out, and it means X number of rounds from an endurance perspective. Yes, you're allowed this many malfunctions or that many malfunctions, and all that's documented and tracked. Ultimately, from a safety perspective, there's a drop safety criteria that ultimately is followed. So, if a badged officer, heaven forbid, is in tussling with someone and the holster is dispatched, or the firearm is dispatched from his holster, and it falls on the ground, that it doesn't go off. Yeah. The process that we follow from testing the metallurgy of our products. Some of that becomes tribal knowledge. So, we learned a long time ago, for example, that this steel works better than that steel versus that steel. So we have a proprietary steel that we use for our barrels. We're known to have cannon grade barrel steel that we use. We follow a hammer forging process, and we have found that provides the endurance and the durability in the barrel, which equates to much longer term accuracy and down the road performance as well. As an example, our polymer is different than a lot of our competitors. There's a lot of quality reasons that cost money. Our product is not the least expensive on the market, and these quality and the amount of testing and the materials that we use and the processes that we use, they cost money.
Yeah.
And again, I said it earlier, we don't litmus test our products, right? So I spend all the money on the testing of the pistols. I bought hundreds of thousands of rounds to test these guns. I don't let the consumers go out and test it, and then I learn from it and make changes. I'm trying to get it right the first time so that doesn't actually happen, because again, going back to shootability, durability, and reliability, and planning toward the usage of that product in what we will call our worst day ever. I can't be litmus testing on people that are trying to defend their life or their family's life with a product.
And I appreciate that. I'll tell you, I've shot a lot of different guns over the years, carried a lot of different guns over the years, competed with different guns over the years, and now I'm using HK pistols. And that is, in today's world, I'm not going to mention any other, specific companies or brands, and it's not even necessarily one specific one. But what I can tell you is that it's a reassurance to me knowing what has gone into the design and engineering, R&D work, and the testing and validation of HK pistols, to know that I can count on them, I can trust them, I don't need to worry about there being an issue somewhere. And I'm not like a super, educated engineer or anything like that, but I understand things fairly well and can take things apart and kind of understand how they work. And I've taken all these apart, all these guns. And the CC9 is a great example of that. When that first came out and I got it in my hands, I start taking it apart and looking at, okay, what have they done with this here? What have they done with the trigger bar? What have they done with some of these other components that reassures me that this is a safe pistol to carry? And it's very evident. You can see, certain components, you can tell that they're built strong enough to perform the way they need to perform, but they're still light, so they're not susceptible to things like a drop.
Absolutely.
Or being impacted. And so those are things that are important to me that I have noticed, and it's very, very evident. Let's talk about the CC9, because I think it's a great example of some of the testing we're talking about. So the big thing, and I talked about this in my own review, which actually still I'm working on a more detailed review for the CC9 write-up and video that goes along with it. It's been said that there's 750,000 rounds of testing that stands behind this little gun right here. And I don't know who you all got shooting CC9s over there, but it's a small gun and it shoots great. I think it's a very comfortable gun to shoot for a micro compact, category gun. But you ain't paying me to shoot 750,000 rounds through a gun that size. Right. So, and not only that, but I think Bill told me, was it 7 different consistencies of mud? 26? 6. Oh, 6. Yeah. 6 different consistencies or types of mud that it was tested in. Sand, water, ice. What else? What am I missing?
Hot, cold.
Yeah,
all the environmentals, right? So,
right. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So it's you're trying to create an environment of which the pistol will ultimately live its life, right? So if you're concealed carrying in the front, you're probably going to be exposed to some sweat, especially if you're in Florida. If you're like Bill Dermody, you probably got some belly hair that's going to get into yours, right? So ultimately, that's a factor. or isn't it? Maybe it's not a problem. If you don't go do the work to find out if it's a problem or not, then ultimately you won't know. But these guns get hot and cold. They get carried inside. They get put in the air conditioning. They get thrown in the console. They get put down inside our waistbands. They get taken back out. They get set back down. They're used with 50, 60, 120 different ammunitions. Yeah. It's tough. Being a concealed carry pistol, and the amount of usage for the average user is very, very light. And we understand that. We wanted to cater to the guy or the gal that ultimately is planning on and practicing to become a better user of their firearm. And anyway, some of those ammunitions and some of those holsters and some of those environmental conditions all have to go into some kind of testing. And we even looked at craziness. We created something called the Fluffer 2000, which created a bunch of lint out of your belly button. And how do you duplicate that, right? So what happens if we take a bunch of dryer sheets and dryer lint and put it in a big giant cement mixer and whip it all together and try to figure that out? Well, there wasn't any findings from that. There's no big scientific test from that. But at the end of the day, we found out that it was a non-factor, right? So, so we even try to go to some extremes of things that are, we'll call it outside of what you would call true die-hard testing from Germany. And understand, we have one criteria, one group testing protocol. So these pistols go through the CC9 specifically went through all of the testing in the U.S. that we could throw at it. Obviously, we have access to more holsters, more ammunitions, etc. And then we sent them over to Germany and tested them through their training facility. Naturally, they have a higher level of not testing protocol, but just testing equipment. And so we're able to get real feedback and real data out of some of the software computer programs and such that we use over there for some of our testing. So, whether it's high speed, low speed video, whether it ultimately ends up being all the different drop tests capabilities, not just any one. We put that pistol through every drop test qualification, and it qualifies at the highest levels, right? So you have several different drop tests. Some are on concrete, some are on metal pads, some are on this height, some are on that. There's not always standardized testing. So we said, okay, we're going to test all of them. Yeah. We're going to deliver a product that achieves all of them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, well, as I mentioned, that's an important thing. I want to not have to worry about my equipment that I'm carrying.
Absolutely.
Not at all. 750,000 rounds. I don't think there is, well, actually, I'm fairly confident in saying this. There's not another micro-compact pistol that's gone through that level of testing.
Sure.
In terms of rounds being fired through it. And I know there's another part of that too, that correct me if I'm wrong, but what was explained to me, and I mean, I'm going to throw him under the bus because either he explained it wrong or I misheard, but anytime the slightest change was made to the CC9 in its development, that you wouldn't do anything else or advance it to the next stage until it had gone through at least another 10,000 rounds.
Absolutely.
Of firing, right? And I think that's remarkable. I think you said that like you changed the texture or something on the grip or something like that, and you're like, 10,000 rounds, got to prove it, right?
Absolutely.
I think that's remarkable.
Yeah, and most of our competitors wouldn't do that. They'd say, "Why are you doing that?" And we do it for all the reasons why we've just talked about, right? Yeah. But I need to understand if I add a little here, take off a little there, does that change my impulse? Does it change my recoil reaction? Does it change my vibration? Does it change the shootability? How about my grip? What impact does it have on the trigger? I got to know what impact that has. And oh, by the way, it's very, very difficult to measure the impact without actually doing the work. Yep. And especially in the U.S. consumer market where you have so many variations of ammunitions, right? We nobody can say their pistol works with all ammunitions, but boy, do we go deep into the 80-20 rules. Ours is more like the 92-8 rule. It's very deep into what ammunition our products work.
And that's such a great point, because people, and particularly if you're just getting started in firearms or concealed carry, carrying a gun for personal defense, whatever, in the beginning, you just start to figure out, oh, there's training or practice ammunition, and there's a variety of types of that. And then there's self-defense ammo. And boy, you could just make your eyes bleed trying to look at all the different rounds and bullets and bullet profiles and all that, bullet weights, velocities, and so on and so forth. And you could just make your eyes bleed trying to figure all this out. And most people probably like, well, that's on the shelf at the local shop here, and it's a good price. I'm going to buy it.
Absolutely.
Well, I would say that in the past, as an instructor, I'd be like, it's probably not the smartest play, especially if you don't go and shoot and vet that ammunition, which probably most people do not, because you just don't know it's going to work with your particular gun. But I know a big point was made to test the CC9 across as many different ammunition types, bullet weights, profiles, velocities, et cetera, pressures that you could do, so you could verify that it works with as much with all the ammunitions that you said. I liked how you said it, all the ammunitions. That's also, I think, a testament to how important it is to you guys and your mission to bring a product that people can rely upon for that day. That's a true concealed carry gun. In a size category that I think, I can't say this for certain, but I think the perception is there that there are certain manufacturers out there that probably don't care that much, that it's like, hey, we just need to make a gun that's small and easy for people to carry. And yeah, it needs to work, but how much are we going to actually, vet that? I don't know.
Yeah. And 5 years ago, I purchased 2 pistols in the same day. I remember it like it was yesterday. Both of those pistols today, they were our competitor's brand.
Yeah.
And both of them were what I would consider today. Is there such a thing now as a sub-micro? Because they would not be considered the scale of a micro today. They were small, smaller than that.
Yeah.
And their life expectancy is over. Because neither one of those pistols are relevant, because people quickly found they couldn't hit a trash can lid with them from 10 yards.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great point.
So the industry has changed drastically in what and how they define that a true concealed carry size.
Yeah, that's a great point too. And I'll just say, we got, again, the VP9 A1 series guns on the table here. We've got the CC9. I've shot them all now. CC9, I've got quite a few rounds through, relatively speaking, over the last several months. And it's a small gun, but it shoots great. And it is indeed reliable. It's accurate. It meets all the standards that I believe a person needs to have a reliable, consistent, good shooting, accurate concealed carry gun that's easy to carry. It might not be the choice for everybody. I've carried full-size guns. I've carried a gun I've carried my VP9L.
Sure.
I'm large enough, dude, I can do that. If you got the right holster equipment and you know how to do it, not that difficult to do for a lot of, full-size human beings. But the one I'm carrying every day is a CC9. Why? Because it's capable, and it's capable enough, and it's also easy to carry. And it's easy to conceal, so it fits in my lifestyle very, very easily. There's times I still go to the full, bigger guns, but it's a great gun. I really appreciate your time today, Mike, kind of talking us through this, sharing us a little bit about what's going on at HK USA, the changes made both at the structural level, but also just learning about your culture, what's important to you guys, your team, diving a little bit into the products that are new and are here at the show. Again, we're at SHOT Show 2025, and the VP9A1 guns and the CC9 are featured here on the show floor. But these are also hitting store shelves. If they're not, like CC9's been out for a while now, right, but the A1 series also shipping, I think, right about now.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. So
hitting store shelves very soon, too. And as you mentioned earlier, and I appreciate this, I think this is an important thing for people to understand. You don't make the most affordable guns or the cheapest guns. You make good guns, the best guns.
That's the goal.
And whatever that costs, whatever that takes, that's what you're going to do.
That's correct.
So if that's the kind of gun that you're looking for, that's I think it's relevant for people to understand and go, okay, that's the gun for me. That's what I want. Maybe that's not the answer for everybody, but that's the answer for many of us. And I think in the context of concealed carry, it's so important to have equipment that works, that you can depend upon.
Thank you.
Well, any final words for us before we part ways?
Yeah, I think we covered it off as it relates to what we're introducing here at the show. Again, 3 major platforms. You could argue it's 5 major platforms here at SHOT Show. Stay tuned because
we didn't even talk about the MR.
No, we didn't,
yeah.
And that's okay. We have roadmaps that will lead us with an awful lot of new products in the future. Over the course of even some coming in 2025, call it back half, but future into 26, 27, 28. So we're super excited. We're glad for the opportunity we had today to sit down with you and talk about our brand and our products. We're very proud of our accomplishments, but we're not resting on those laurels. Yeah. We know what our job is to deliver the best products that we can to the consumer, and that's our goal.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike, for your time today. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Well, there you go. Thank you for listening to this interview with Mike Holley, president of HK USA. As I mentioned, I really enjoyed my time together with him and their team and their crew, of course, in Las Vegas. Spent a fair bit of time in the HK booth on the show floor and got to meet some awesome folks, both from HK, but also just people stopping by and visiting the booth and checking out their new products, which was a lot of fun to be a part of. So with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Again, thank you to our sponsors for making this possible. In this case, it'd be HK. Also, the Guardian Conference. Don't forget to check that out. Go to guardianconference.com to learn more. And until next time, a reminder to train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care.
A reminder that laws vary from place to place, and we encourage listeners to seek local legal advice to understand applicable laws. Concealed Carry Inc., its brands and properties, and the Concealed Carry Podcast is not a legal service, nor are we attorneys at law. We make our best faith effort to share concealed carry-related insights and information about firearm-related incidents and the laws pertaining based on our own understanding and experience. But things could be different where you live, or laws may have changed by the time you listen to this. We cannot be held liable for your actions based on the information shared in this podcast. Please exercise care with all things pertaining to firearm use, concealed carry, and always practice following basic firearm safety rules. More information about safety can be found at concealedcarry.com/.